Only in Kentucky can a county seat move a mountain to survive a river and two families who spent 30 years killing each other over a hog. Hi, I'm Michael, and I'm learning a little bit more about Kentucky, one county at a time, all 120 of them. And today, I'm learning about Pike County. Pike County is Kentucky's easternmost county and its largest by land area. It sits entirely within the Appalachian Plateau, a landscape of steep forested ridges and deep, narrow valleys carved by the Leviza and Tug Forks of the Big Sandy River. The county was formed on December 19th, 1821, carved from the southern portion of Floyd County. It was named after Brigadier General Zebulon Pike, the explorer who traced the Mississippi River to its headwaters in 1805, and the following year pushed west into the Rockies, where he spotted the mountain that would eventually bear his name, Pike's Peak. In April of 1813, during the War of 1812, Pike led an American assault on New York, the capital of Upper Canada, present-day Toronto. The British detonated their own ammunition magazine during surrender negotiations. The explosion killed 38 Americans. Pike was struck by debris and died a few hours later on the deck of a ship in Lake Ontario, with the captured British flag draped over him. Kentucky named Pike County after him, but interestingly, somewhere in Pike County, a community called Canada exists, with a name that may or may not trace back to exactly where he died. Nobody's for sure, but I thought that was interesting. The county seat is Pikeville, established in 1824 on land donated by a local farmer named Elijah Atkins. It sits in a narrow valley along the Leviza Fork, and for the first century of its existence, the only reliable way in or out was by river. Flatboats carried timber and produce downstream. Steamboats made seasonal runs upriver when the water was high enough. That changed in 1905 when the Chesapeake and Ohio Railroad reached Pikeville. The C&O Passenger Depot, built in 1923, is a classical revival brick building that still stands in downtown Pikeville today. It marks the moment when Pike County stopped being isolated and began to connect to the national economy. That connection had one primary purpose, and that was coal. But we'll talk about that in a second, because first, we have to talk about the Hatfields and McCoys. The Hatfield-McCoy feud is one of the most documented events in American regional history, and Pike County is where most of it happened and where it was also finally settled. There's more than a dozen historical markers scattered about the county dedicated to the feud and its participants. The graves of the McCoy family are here. The courthouse where the Hatfields were tried still stands. The hanging site of the man who took the fall for the worst of it is also marked. The roots run to the Civil War. Asa Harmon McCoy was the younger brother of Randolph McCoy, the family patriarch. Harmon was a Union soldier who returned home in December of 1864 to the Tug Valley, a region that leaned heavily Confederate. On January 7, 1865, a Confederate guerrilla unit called the Logan Wildcats, organized by William Anderson Hatfield, known as Devil Ants, tracked Harmon to a cave along Peter Creek in Pike County. They shot him and left him to die. No one was ever prosecuted, and this is the first recorded incident between the two families. But what formally started the feud was a hog. In 1878, Floyd Hatfield drove his hogs into pens on the Kentucky side of the Tug Fork. Randolph McCoy spotted one and claimed it bore his mark. He accused Floyd Hatfield of theft and brought suit. The justice of the peace who convened the trial was a Hatfield. He assembled a jury of 6 Hatfields and 6 McCoys. The key witness was a man named William Stanton, who had family ties to both sides. Stanton testified for the Hatfields, and Floyd Hatfield walked free. William Stanton was eventually killed by 2 of Randolph McCoy's nephews. A Hatfield-picked jury ruled self-defense. A hog trial, a compromised jury, a dead witness, and a verdict that satisfied nobody. That's how the feud started. And the feud escalated on Election Day in August 1882 at an Election Day gathering. A fight broke out between Talbert McCoy and Ellison Hatfield, a brother of Devil Ants. Talbert's brothers jumped in. Ellison was stabbed more than 24 times and shot. A local justice of the peace had the 3 McCoy brothers arrested and escorted toward the jail in Pikeville. Devil Ants organized a posse. They intercepted the constables, relieved them of the prisoners, and took the 3 McCoy brothers across the Tug Fork into West Virginia. Devil Ants made a declaration: if Ellison survived, the McCoys might survive. Ellison died. The 3 McCoy brothers were taken back to the Kentucky side of the river, tied to pawpaw bushes, and shot dead. Despite that brutality, the feud went quiet for 5 years. What broke the silence was a lawyer in Pikeville named Perry Klein. Klein was a distant McCoy relative with his own grievance against Devil Ants involving a land dispute. He petitioned Kentucky's governor to intervene, offering rewards for the arrest of Devil Ants and his supporters. The governor agreed. A former deputy sheriff named Frank Phillips was appointed special envoy and authorized to cross into West Virginia to make arrests. On New Year's Day, 1888, before the arrest could happen, a Hatfield raiding party attacked the McCoy home on Blackberry Creek. 2 of Randolph and Sarah McCoy's children were killed. Their daughter Alifair was shot. Their son Calvin was shot. Sarah McCoy, known as Aunt Sally, was beaten senseless while trying to reach her injured daughter. Randolph hid in a pig pen and survived. The house was burned to the ground. Randolph and Sarah McCoy never went back to Blackberry Creek. They moved to Pikeville, where Randolph operated a ferry across the Big Sandy for the rest of his life. They're buried at Dill Cemetery in Pikeville, one of the first integrated cemeteries in eastern Kentucky. 8 members of the Hatfield group were eventually captured, brought to Pikeville, tried at the Pike County Courthouse, convicted of murder, and sentenced to life in prison. One of them, a 25-year-old named Ellison Mounts, was sentenced to death. Perry Klein, who had defended the other Hatfield defendants, declined to defend Mounts and instead persuaded him to confess to the press. On February 18, 1890, Mounts was hanged in Pikeville. It was the first public hanging in the county in 4 decades. Thousands came to watch, some expecting a rescue attempt by the Hatfields. No rescue came. Standing on the gallows, Mounts said, "The Hatfields made me do it." Some historians believe he was a scapegoat for the entire clan. The Pike County sheriff carried out the sentence, and the feud was effectively over. But today, the feud is tourism. There's a driving tour. There are markers at the hog trial site, the pawpaw tree site, the McCoy house site, the courthouse, and the hanging site. The tug fork still runs between Kentucky and West Virginia, still marking the line the two families fought over. There's one more story from this era that almost nobody outside academic circles knows, and it deserves more attention than it gets. Effie Waller Smith was born in Pike County on January 6, 1879, the daughter of formerly enslaved parents. Her father had been enslaved in Virginia. Her mother had been enslaved to a white family in Pike County itself. Both parents placed extraordinary value on education despite their own limited literacy. All 4 Waller children eventually earned teaching certificates at the Kentucky Normal School for Colored Persons, now known as Kentucky State University. Effie started writing poetry at 16. By 1904, she had published her first full collection, Songs of the Months, through Broadway Publishing in New York. 2 more collections followed by 1909. She was publishing in national journals, asserting her racial heritage directly in her writing, knowing her readership would be largely white. And then possibly created an alter ego. An Effie Smith from Baileyton, Tennessee. Historians believe this allowed her to publish in more prominent national journals, including Harper's Monthly Magazine, without identifying herself as black. Smith never confirmed any of that, but maybe. Her personal life was brutal. Her second husband, a police deputy named Charles Smith, was shot and killed in 1911 while attempting to arrest white moonshiners. The moonshiners were found innocent in a trial that lasted less than a day. She published almost nothing for the next 30 years. She moved to Wisconsin. She died in 1960. She has just that one historical marker in Pikeville, while the feud has more than a dozen. Anyway, the C&O Railroad reached Pikeville in 1905. In 1900, Pike County had about 22,000 people. By 1940, it had over 71,000 people. By 1950, over 81,000. A county with almost no flat land, no farmable acreage to speak of, that nearly quadrupled in population in 50 years. Every one of those people was there because of coal. Coal companies built entire towns, company housing, company stores, company schools. The company owned the land, the buildings, and in many cases, the currency workers were paid in. Scrip redeemable only at the company store. Stone, Kentucky was named for Galen Stone, head of the Pond Creek Coal Company in 1922. The mine was sold to Fortson Coal Company, a Ford Motor Company subsidiary. It's really interesting that Henry Ford briefly owned a coal town in Pike County, Kentucky. Shelbyana grew around what became the second largest railroad yard in Kentucky. Coal from that yard shipped to multiple states and several foreign countries. Before the circus company disbanded, the Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Circus would stop its train in Shelbyana while traveling between performances and stage free shows for local residents there. The circus stopped in a coal town in Pike County and performed for free. But as we know, the coal eventually stopped. Appalachian coal production fell roughly 80% between 2000 and 2015. The population, which peaked at over 81,000 in 1950, fell to 58,000 by 2020. What coal left behind included stripped hillsides, acid mine drainage, and a workforce trained for work that no longer exists. It also worsened the flood problem. Pike County had always flooded. In April of 1977, the Leviza and Tug Forks both flooded catastrophically, killing 10 people in Kentucky and causing damage across the entire county. But the Army Corps of Engineers had already been working on something. The Pikeville cut-through was the idea of a Pikeville native and longtime mayor named William Hambley, who first proposed it in 1960. His original motivation was coal dust. The C&O ran coal trains directly through downtown Pikeville daily, and the dust never stopped. Hambley proposed relocating the railroad. The plan expanded to include rerouting the Leviza Fork itself, which flooded downtown almost every single year. Construction began in November of 1973. The Army Corps of Engineers spent 14 years blasting nearly 18 million cubic yards of soil and rock from Peach Orchard Mountain, a ridge immediately west of downtown. They cut a channel 1,300 feet wide, 3,700 feet long, and 523 feet deep through solid mountain. The Leviza Fork was rerouted through the cut. The former riverbed was filled in, creating 240 new acres of developable land where the river once flowed. A 4-lane highway, a railroad, and the river itself now pass through the cut simultaneously. It's the second largest earth-moving project in the Western Hemisphere, second only to the Panama Canal. The road running along the former railroad bed through downtown Pikeville is called Hambly Boulevard, named for the mayor who first imagined moving a mountain to save his city from a river and a dust problem. John Paul Riddle was born here in 1901, graduated from Pikeville College in 1920, joined the Army Air Corps, and co-founded what became Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University, which trained more than 25,000 American and British pilots during World War II and is today one of the largest aviation universities in the world. Patty Loveless was born in Pikeville in 1957 and became one of the most respected voices in country music, returning in her writing again and again to the mountains where she grew up. Dwight Yoakam was born here in 1956 and became one of the defining voices of the neo-traditional country movement of the 1980s. Catherine Bringy Langley, born in Pike County in 1888, became the first woman elected to Congress from Kentucky, serving from 1927 to 1931, and in my opinion, it's sad that she is written about considerably less than the McCoys and the Hatfields. Every April, tens of thousands of people come to Pikeville for Hillbilly Days, a festival started in 1977 by a group of Shriners as a fundraiser for the Shriners Children's Hospital. 6 stages run simultaneously with country, bluegrass, and mountain music. People come from across the country in overalls and wild costumes, filling Hambly Boulevard, the road named for the man who moved a mountain. The festival raises money for 6 children by celebrating a stereotype of the place where it happens, with full awareness of what it's doing in a city that literally rerouted a river to survive. So, that's Pike County. What'd I get wrong this time?